So I thought that was really cool. Tasha Smith was in the show. She played a slightly older, very successful corporate world, but also was like discovering some stuff about her. Now, two people in, I guess you would say, like the drag race world, so to speak. And I had the great honor of being around previous years. Well, first of all, Peppermint was in it. And Peppermint I met 100 years ago when I first moved to New York, and it was one of the first events that I worked, because I was working events when I first got to New York City, when I first got here. And coincidentally, we lived in the same neighborhood of that time. And one of the events that I did, I was working events, but I was a transportation this particular run of show. And it was a multiple days. And it was actually the like Kenneth Cole. It was the Cole Haan Pump, and it was some marketing campaign. Very like experiential marketing. So what they did, and I think it was along the lines of like when the TV show Drag Race, like season 5, was blowing up. But anyways, let me just get to the part. That was what the campaign was. So Peppermint was, as a performer, was hired to be there. Where I was also doing transportation for Willem. I was doing transportation for Manila Luzon. Like it was, and tons of New York girls too. Kitten with the Whip. We know Kitten with the Whip. Now Bob the Drag Queen. So it was just a wonderful experience, and it's just so funny that the out of all of the people we were around, both the production and the locations, the team at Kenneth Cole, out of all the people, the person that I connected with immediately was Peppermint. I mean, maybe because we lived in the exact same neighborhood, it could have been that. I mean, I remember there was a time, years flashing forward, Peppermint like recognized me, in the street or whatever, and was like, hey, I haven't seen you in a couple years, and wow, are you settling in? And it was just so wonderful. So I've always had that sort of bond with Peppermint, and this was several years before Peppermint became the first trans woman to do Drag Race. This was years before the access to that TV show. But I always really took to Peppermint just as a New York City, the resume, you know what I mean? Like, and just, it really felt nice. And so to see Drag Race and the Broadway show and this and that and this, it's just so wonderful. And actually, right here on the channel, one of my very first episodes, Peppermint was so gracious to be a guest on one of my initial episodes, which was actually very hard because when you start a project, you don't really have like numbers at all. I mean, technically I still don't, but like I have a show. And I thought it was really sweet that Peppermint did my show, and we had a ton of fun. We talked about everything.
And so between 2004 and 2005, I was releasing new music, I was traveling, I had dancers, I had a band, and I was just kind of getting myself in a bunch of different things. I think one of the ways that I remember first meeting was on a kind of a promotional activation where there were some other drag queens, Manila from Drag Race, Willem from Drag Race, and a couple other girls. And that was our first time meeting. I don't remember, that was probably like 2010.
You are 11, yeah.
Something like that. But yeah, that was like I was able to do a lot of different things because of the kind of the work that I put into my drag. It was a shoe company that we were doing something for, if you remember. And I was getting more and more opportunities like that. And so I think it was not only, obviously Drag Race has certainly kind of made everything in Technicolor, but even before Drag Race, I think people were starting to realize that drag queens, and people who did drag were talented in so many different areas that you could kind of utilize them not only at the bar, but also during the day, at an event, in a commercial, as a brand ambassador, doing some type of promotional activation where they're like standing on the corner and talking about your products. And so there ended up being so many different opportunities and places where I could at least have a platform. And that was really interesting to me.
Going back to that time, yeah, it was an event that Peppermint was she was the talent. I was working in the production side. I was working a lot of transportation at the moment. And this was like right when I moved to New York. You know, it's such a great time to even think back to, because so much has changed. You were talking about sort of getting out the nightlife stuff. Not that you didn't continue it, but like now MTV, everyone's like looking how they could infuse drag queens into their product. You know, this was a Cole Haan promotion for the Chelsea pump. I remember it as if it was yesterday. But what's so interesting and warm-hearted about you was you were essentially, I think we worked about 5 days together, you and I. Willem was also in our vehicle as well. And it was so many great things we'll attribute to this, but it was such a welcoming to New York City. So you really were one of the first people I knew. And I just really had this a bit fish out of water component, you know, like, whoa, New York is just different. And then I think it was such a blessing that I had you and Willem, you know, as my people.
Now, here's a little quandary riddle mystery. Why does peppermint smell like cinnamon?
Because every time I wear peppermint fragrance, people say, girl, who's wearing Vicks Vapor Rub? Not cute.
Okay, so I'm loving that peppermint's in there. I'm loving that there is such a variety, a beautiful variety of queer representation weaved in so naturally that we do live and feel in New York City. You know, like I said, the places I've lived in New York, you know, Harlem, Hamilton Heights, Weehawken, New Jersey, Astoria for a month, and a lot of time also in Bushwick, Ridgewood, those areas. And like the way so seamlessly, like CeCe Blooms felt like experiences that we've all had, you know what I mean? And it was the thing that this show was really wonderful at, and I want to make sure I hopefully word this the correct way, but it's like all of these things that could be worded as like, oh, well, this was different because we don't really see all these things. Well, that's the sad part. We don't see all these things. But what was great is they weren't, oh God, let me come after this show. They weren't weaved in a way that Sex and the Cities and just like that season 1 was, where it was like, we're going to try too hard to uplift these issues, but like it didn't feel natural. And so with all of the stuff that was going on, I mean, I love the last episode. I won't tell you anything about the choices that the Mavis character made and where she sort of took potential big money career versus something that was passionate to her, and the way that was weaved in so beautifully. I mean, bravo to Michelle and the team over there. And of course, yes, Peppermint was part of a lot of that, you know. Well, there's a really interesting moment that happens with Garcelle Beauvais' character, who plays, you know, a model who was, you know, had a huge name in the 90s and is still adapting to, you know, the newness of the 2020s, and maybe, you know, her body not being what it once was, but still gorgeous. And this is why the Mavis character really gave a lot to the character, to I think it was Natasha was the name of the Garcelle Beauvais character. It was a perfect fit because, you know, I think the people who identify themselves in the beauty world, sometimes that identity of beauty is really a little constraining, you know. And I thought, again, naturally, very naturally, it was weaved in a way where the empowerment that Mavis, Michelle Buteau's character, was able to give to somebody like Natasha, who maybe wouldn't have looked and explored and opened up herself in those ways. It felt like a real conversation. And I also think, I mean, probably Michelle and Garcelle seem like they are buddies in real life. Like they feel like they really do laugh a ton. Okay.
Hey, Ronnie Jr.